Hello, Slashies, and welcome to Slashed, a horror podcast where we talk about the scares, the screams, and the spooky stuff. My name is Grace.
And my name is Wouter, and today, once again, we have a very lovely special guest host on. Would you please introduce yourself to our lovely audience?
Hello, I'm Kyllian.
Well, welcome, Kyllian. Thank you for being on the show once again. We also love having our friends on, and Kyllian is, again, a very dear friend of ours. And the reason we wanted to do this episode with Kyllian was because we wanted to talk about Crimson Peak, because Grace really loves the film, and we were both under the impression that Kyllian had seen it before, so he seemed like the perfect co-host. Turns out he hadn't seen it, so it was a big surprise for 2/3 of us. Nevertheless, we are going to dive into it after Grace has once again graced us with one of her lovely synopses.
Just to clarify, by now we've all seen it.
Yes, we watch these before we record them.
Let's get into the synopses.
Yeah.
Crimson Peak is a 2015 gothic romance film directed by Guillermo del Toro and co-written by Guillermo del Toro and Matthew Robbins. Set in the early 1900s, the film follows the story of American author Edith Cushing, played by Mia Wasikowska, and her fatal attraction to English baronet and inventor Thomas Sharp, played by Tom Hiddleston. Edith and Thomas first meet when Thomas visits her father in an attempt to get him to fund a clay mining machine. Edith's father quickly dismisses Thomas and later bribes him to stop him from pursuing Edith any further. When her father is mysteriously and brutally murdered, however, Edith accepts Thomas' proposal and the two quickly move to England along with his sister Lucille, portrayed by Jessica Chastain. The honeymoon quickly turns into a nightmare when Edith finds out that Thomas's estate is nicknamed Crimson Peak, the exact place that her mother's ghost warned her to stay away from. The estate holds more secrets, and Thomas and Lucille's stories begin to unravel. After encountering several ghosts, Edith discovers that Thomas has actually been married multiple times before, and that all his wives have come to a brutal end in Crimson Peak. While Thomas begins to develop genuine feelings for Edith, Lucille grows more aggravated at her presence and begins to poison and threaten her. Thomas has a change of heart, and he turns against Lucille, breaking off their incestuous relationship in favor of Edith. The enraged Lucille murders him before chasing Edith with a meat cleaver. Aided by Dr. McMichael, Edith's childhood friend who visits Crimson Peak just in time, Edith fights off Lucille and saves herself and Dr. McMichael. The film ends with her saying goodbye to Thomas's ghost.
Yes, thank you very much. That was very moving. Yeah, I just found it a very moving story. I was actually quite endeared by the film. It was not as scary as I thought it would be. Because you really hyped it up for me. It's like, oh, it's going to be really spooky. It's going to be a haunted house. You're going to be...
You did spasm.
I spazzed a few times, yeah. Yeah, it has to be one of us, and usually it's me.
Well, we all held hands together for you.
Yeah, that was very nice. It helps. We even brought... we're recording this at Kyllian's place, and we even brought our own blankie for me. But yeah, let's get into the film.
Yeah, so we already talked about that. It actually maybe wasn't as scary as you thought it would be.
No.
I thought I'd just warn you that there are going to be jump scares in there. But I think that was kind of the feeling a lot of people probably had going into this film, because as I said in the synopsis, it's a gothic romance, but it certainly wasn't marketed as such. It was marketed as more of a classic horror haunted house kind of film.
Yeah, definitely. I watched the trailer, and I really got a huge Haunting of Hill House vibe from it. And I looked at the one of the posters too, and it was just a black background and then just elongated red skull on the front, like looked like a damn pirate flag. It's like, oh crap, this is gonna be the scariest shit ever. I just knew. But fortunately it wasn't, which was weird. Because, yeah, as you said, it's really marketed that way and really made to look that way.
Yeah, I remember when I first watched it, I did think that the ghosts looked quite scary. I'm not sure if they just haven't aged well, or maybe I've kind of outgrown being scared of that kind of thing. But I did really think that the design of the ghosts didn't hugely hold up and were a bit
Janky.
Campy, maybe even.
I did. Yeah, maybe we'll get into it later. It did match the feel of the film.
Yeah.
but they were quite out there. But the film is as well. So
Yeah.
I think they're not necessarily supposed to be super scary. Like, obviously, it's a tense moment when you see them, but in the end, you kind of learn that all the ghosts we see are friendly and actually trying to help Edith figure out what the mystery is and get her to leave, basically.
Yeah, they're basically trying to scare her away at first, or
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
like yowling and crying out for help, which I think was for me very effective. But I do agree that the ghosts look kind of campy. They look like if you've been to, I don't know, I've just been to Paris Disneyland, and they look like what the ghosts look like when you see them reflected in a mirror. Sort of, it's all a very smoke and mirrors looking,
Yeah.
where it sort of looks like a projection on a screen. And I kind of like it if it's intentional because they're clearly supposed to be sort of figments from the past, sort of jittery memories, and it really works well if you look at it that way. But just from a like pure I'm looking at this now perspective, it was jump scare value, and then it looked a bit comical. Like also how they were moving, they were doing these very stereotypical sort of quick stepping, pitter pattering horror movements, which looked a bit funky. Like it had a sort of Pennywise-esque quality to it, and not in a good way.
What I did really like, and that's only something that I picked up on now, is that all their ring fingers had been cut off. So kind of hinting at that Lucille probably did that to get the ring back.
Yeah, because the ring keeps passing on from
Yeah,
person to person.
and she doesn't want to let go of it.
No, because it's hers.
Yeah, because she is Thomas's wife.
As well as his sister.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really neat twist, by the way. I thought, the twist is going to be that they're not actually brother and sister, but they are married. But no, it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was really neatly done.
Yeah, there are a couple of good jump scares in there though, where there is a point where she finds those wax rolls things,
The recordings.
the recordings, and that closet jump scare thingy was scary.
The ghost that pulls the door close again.
Oh man!
But the other ones were it didn't feel like they were supposed to be the horror kind of scary.
No, and I found it kind of cheap also because there's a lot of thing moves in the background which the protagonist can't see, and then a musical stinger which I find kind of lazy in that sense. Because the film is tense enough by itself, and I feel like that sort of deflates that tension. Because I do agree with Kyllian that scene with the closet was really good. Like,
yeah, there's a few of those moments where I feel like where I wonder what's really going on, because on one hand it's this film that doesn't really want to use the ghosts in that way, but wants to use them as kind of messengers from the past. And then there's parts of the film that does use them in that, okay, you hear a screeching violin and something is running in the background. It's kind of a weird mixture in there.
Yeah, and it's also such a shame actually, because there's a lot of beautiful eye candy in the film, because
it's gorgeous.
Yeah, and of course that's one of the things Guillermo del Toro does really well. He is just so good at making these visually pleasing films. And I just love the scene where Edith is walking down a hallway past a wheelchair, and there's some dust particles flittering down from the window, and then they sort of drop down onto this ghostly figure, and it's really hard to make out actually that there's actually somebody sitting in a wheelchair. And I thought that was beautiful, and I thought that would have been more effective for me if it had been more of that and not the running in the background jump scary stuff.
Although I do feel like the some of it did really work though. It was supposed to be unsettling also for the protagonist to find out that they were friendly ghosts.
Yeah.
And not the scary spoopy kind, but the friendly ones. So
yeah.
And once she gets there, the ghosts also don't feel scary anymore. And
yeah, because it's true that those kind of more typical jump scary moments kind of leave the film once you get through that development.
Yeah, so in that sense, it moves with the protagonist, as you guys said. Yeah,
but the one when the protagonist doesn't see it, like in the background, you see shadows with the audio thingy. Yeah, then that's unnecessary. I agree on that. Though. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because to me there seems to be sort of obviously they're telling this meta story where Edith is also a writer, and she's written what she calls a story featuring ghosts, not a ghost story, which I think is a commentary about the film as a whole, like how we should interpret this. And she gets a lot of like pushback when she first tries to publish it. Like it needs romance and it needs this and this. And I kind of almost feel like that's what happened to this film, where it is this beautiful story involving ghosts, and then someone went, it's not scary enough, it needs more jump scares. We're gonna market it in a really horror, gory way.
Yeah, that's actually a really nice take. Yeah, I can. And Guillermo del Toro does feel like the guy who is just gonna go like, "F you, this is how I'm gonna make this film."
Yeah.
He's definitely got his own vision of how he wants to make things.
Yeah. And knows when to tap out when that's clearly not what the studio wants.
Well, what are we referencing here?
The Hobbit.
Oh, was he on The Hobbit?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, because Peter Jackson didn't want to do it.
No, I know that he was sort of roped
But
into it together.
if you want to learn all about this, watch Lindsay Ellis's video on The Hobbit, because we'll get into it too much.
Let's not get into that. But
Yeah.
thank you for educating me. Did not know. Staying on the topic of Guillermo del Toro, now that we've dropped his name so often, though, I've seen this interview by him that really stuck with me, and it's and I think it shows in a lot of his films, and I really appreciate it. And it is, he told the interviewer that when he was a kid, he fell onto a spike fence with his armpit, and he said it hurt like hell. And he found that a lot of films, people get stabbed, shot, punched, and just walk it off. And he just wants to make stuff look painful as hell. So and that also goes into this film. Like Dr. McMichael gets stabbed in the armpit, and it does look painful as hell. And you can see him playing through that. And then, in a very Guillermo del Toro fashion, Tom Hiddleston's character Thomas gets stabbed in the mouth, basically in the cheek. And subsequently dies, and that also you see him just quivering and shaking, just completely shocked by the pain, and that was so effective for me because that really sells the intensity of getting stabbed in the face, and I feel like that just and so that stuff adds to the tension of the film. And it also adds on to the intensity of the film in how all the ghosts died, just all the wails, if you know what happened to them, aren't really scary, but just wails of pain and anguish, and it just makes it all so tragic, and I think that's just really well done.
Yeah, it's also, you kind of expect McMichael to reappear near the end of the film, like the very end of the film, and save the day. But, he's been stabbed twice. He's just out.
Yeah.
He's just focusing on not bleeding out.
I really like that Edith.
Yeah.
Edith, yes.
Yeah, was the one that settled it in the end. And not a savior that came together. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just the two women battling it out.
Yeah.
It's such brutal, like painful, not efficient weapons.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, the meat cleaver. Oh my god.
And just getting clonked in the head with that shovel. Like, you could just see the way her head moved when it hit it. It was just,
Yeah, it felt...
you just saw the neck breaking.
Yeah.
And I was actually kind of disappointed, but also glad they didn't, because like the whole thing in the film is the big machine that Thomas wants to build. It's a sort of Jacob's ladder that scoops up clay from the ground. And it has these steam engines and huge gears, all twisting and turning really fast. And there's this one scene where Thomas nearly gets his hand caught in the thing. And I was like, that's the Chekhov's gun. That's going to be the big set piece at the end. And then the two ladies, Edith and Lucille, battle it out near that machine. It's like, somebody's going to get caught up in those gears and die. And then I just whacked him in the face with a shovel. So that was, on one hand, I liked that it was just clean and simple. You die now, and you even got a little nice sort of catchphrase from Edith at the end. But I'm also kind of ashamed that the machine was just there for sort of motivation for Thomas, and then it was just a set piece. A beautiful set piece at that, but I feel something that they wanted to establish and then didn't.
I'm not sure. I don't think it was ever necessarily intended like that. I think when you see Thomas burning his hand on the machine, it's more metaphor that it's going to kind of bite him in the ass, that he's trying to create this machine, just no matter the cost, killing people over it, and that's going to, it's literally going to burn his hands. Is that how do you say that in English?
Yeah, you do say he gets burned. Yeah,
Yeah,
you get burned for it later. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is
And I also feel like the moment is a metaphor, but it's also an important moment for Edith and him to kind of get closer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when they're out of the house, that's actually the first time they really connect.
And consummate their marriage to say it in the most chaste terms.
Yeah.
Was a nice butt, by the way.
Yeah.
That's when the film earned its R rating with Tom Hiddleston's pearly, shining buttocks.
Why are they pearly? I don't like that.
Okay.
They were very white.
They were very white.
Yeah. Gotta appreciate the buttocks.
Yeah, it was quite nice. And he was much more nude than she was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there was a scene where Edith is bathing, and they're also very much not showing any as little nudity as possible. So I feel that's very tastefully done, probably on the actress's part, and maybe also on the director's part, that it just doesn't want to.
I mean, horror is certainly the genre that kind of uses female nude gratuitously.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they didn't necessarily felt the need to go for it, because it didn't add anything.
No, she was just bathing.
Yeah. I have to say though, that one scene, the where they consummate their marriage, is probably the only scene where I didn't like her costume. Because it did not look like lingerie, but it also didn't look like the underclothes that she probably would have been wearing, matching the dress that she was wearing before. But apart from that, the costumes were so beautiful and so lovely. I loved all the sleeves, and I loved her hair so much. Her hair and her costume were actually in the same time period, and I was so very happy to see that.
Yeah, this is clearly more your cup of tea. You're very big on accurate costume design.
Yeah.
And, I sort of I wouldn't be able to tell right from wrong, but somehow you can, though. In this film, you can just it feels like this is just a complete picture. Like everything just works together so beautifully. It's this is a film I feel that you can just freeze at every second. How it just look beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think as you said, I think the costume designs clearly attributes to that.
Yeah, and I liked it as well that they said, oh, they're wearing very nice. Edith commented that Thomas and Lucille were wearing very nice clothes, but clearly old. And I think she said his suit was 10 years old. So the film is set in 1901. I would say that at least Lucille's costume looked more dated than that, because she was wearing a bustle. And that kind of bustle really wasn't worn anymore in the 1890s. But nevertheless, like, they clearly looked more dated. Like, it wasn't just said, they actually did dress that way. So I'm really glad because of that.
It's really cool that they were very accurate, and also the costumes seemed very out there with the colors and the contrast just between Edith and Lucille, and it was really beautifully done.
Yeah.
And sometimes I thought it might be a bit too out there to be accurate, but it is. It's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I really loved it. The aesthetic is so good in the film.
Yeah. Also, sorry, you first.
They do a lot with the colors, not only in the costumes, but of course with the Crimson Peak that turns red. It's so good to see all those red backgrounds. It's just like blood.
Yeah.
And the bloody ghosts, which are kind of drowned in the mud pits.
Yeah, in the clay pits. Yeah.
Or at least hidden from prying eyes.
Yeah.
I also really liked, speaking of red, that the first time we see Lucille, she is playing the piano in a red dress. And then at the end, when she's fighting Edith, her white dress sort of get progressively more red because she is bleeding all over herself. I thought that was really, really cool. Just sort of nice full circle there. And also it's a nice stark contrast with Edith's dress, that it remains nicely white. Yeah, but I do agree because I was waiting for it, like because the estate is called something else, called Adaldale or something. Yeah, actually, Adel Hall. And I was like, why is the film called Crimson Peak? And then it was mentioned so offhandish almost. Like Thomas just goes, that's why I call it Crimson Peak. It's like, oh, okay, that's the title of the film. Why? But it's actually, it makes so much sense because he comes over with the red clay that he's trying to pawn off to her dad. And he's like, oh, and then the snow falls onto the ground and it makes it look bright red. And then it,
Like blood.
like
Yeah.
blood, yeah.
Oh, that was so beautifully done in the end when it actually snowed and all the footprints became red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course it makes perfect sense story-wise as well, because if the estate had actually been called Crimson Peak and Thomas had been, hey, you want to marry me, move back to my hometown, it's called Crimson Peak, she would have been like, no, I've literally been warned. I shouldn't go to this place. My mom's ghost visits me occasionally and she tells me not to go, so I won't. But she doesn't know. Why would she know? And then when she finds out, she's in too deep.
Yeah, then she's already in. She's been drinking the poison tea multiple times.
Yeah.
How did her mother know about Crimson Peak though?
Well, she said it was a message from out of time. So the idea that ghosts perceive time differently in the ghost dimension. And she was like, I'll surely tell my child when she's 10.
Yeah.
And hope that her memory is good enough that she'll remember once she is in her 20s.
And I'll do it in the most horrifying way.
But she did it again when Tom Hiddleston came knocking on her door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it's kind of ghosts are outside of time, but they also, that's why they can't really grasp time. So maybe the mother was like, I have no idea when I'm telling you this, but at least I got it.
Yeah. I did like, though, I know why, I think I can think of a reason why the mother looks so spooky as she does, or why she chooses to appear to her daughter in that way. And this doesn't really work for the other ghosts, so it might be a bit flimsy. But it's a whole thing that her mother died of black cholera, right? And that was a closed casket funeral, no goodbye kiss. That's a whole thing in the opening monologue. So maybe the only memory Edith has of her mum is her being this horrible black rotten body that's somewhere in the casket, and she can't vividly visualize her mother's face anymore.
And the mother's super veiled, right? She's wearing all these black veils over her face. So maybe that was the thing before, like she got disfigured because of the disease and no one was allowed to look at her.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's called black cholera, so it's a black ghost, and then you have all the killings on Crimson Peak with the red ghost. So I think that's also kind of a shorthand for the color. Yeah, the colors.
I thought it worked really well.
It was that was a very nice aesthetic. Like the design of the ghosts, other than how the effects looked, were very nice.
Yeah.
And I love a film that just comes straight out and it's like, okay, here's the ghost.
Yeah.
It's going to be ghosts. They're going to be throughout the film. And then we kind of get back to it's a story featuring ghosts, not a ghost story.
Yeah. It's really upfront about kind of everything. Like you knew that there was something up with Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah.
And Lucille.
And Lucille. It was plain obvious, and the only kind of reveal there was that they Edith's father wasn't killed by
Thomas, but by Lucille. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Because we were all watching it just now, and I thought I was about to commend the film because how the dad dies is he in this gentleman's club in the bathhouse section, and he's left alone, and then he gets his face bashed in on a sink by a cloaked figure. And I thought a figure in black clothing, black gloves, black coat. And I thought I could fairly clearly see that it was Jessica Chastain's face and hair. So I thought they're being upfront about this. They've clearly been shady all along. And even before he died, the dad had found out about their relationship. And he said to Jessica Chastain's character, Lucille, you are clearly the brains of the operation or something along the lines. So I was like, the film wants us to know that she is behind most of this. They killed her, or she did, and that kickstarts the relationship between Thomas and Edith. And that's why I found it so weird that the film took the trouble to make it a whole reveal thing, because I found it so cool that it didn't care, didn't care for us to know that Lucille was clearly shady and clearly up to something. But then apparently to you guys, it was a big reveal. So
Yeah,
how did that work?
You did not see in the first shot. You did not see the hair or the face at all, and it was just the black coat, the similar one to that Thomas wears, and the black leather gloves that also Thomas wears those. So it was like, oh, it's Thomas.
Yeah, and because it's in a gentleman's club, you assume that, only Thomas would have had access.
Yeah, I guess it didn't even really click for me that it was a gentleman's club. I was just, he's just in a really fancy barbershop. Did you like, I'll have some coffee if it's hot, and I'll have a port, and the newspaper, and eggs and ham.
But I'll shave myself in this fancy barbershop.
Yeah, or it's just a really weird
It's just a restaurant.
a really weird restaurant.
Yeah. I think it doesn't matter in that way. Like, the first time I watched it, I was convinced it was Thomas, because I feel like the film kind of lets you make that assumption, kind of banks on you making that assumption. And when we were watching it now, I thought, well, it's so clearly not him. If you go into it knowing it, it's so clearly actually Lucille. And I was really glad, because I thought they might have done something weird where the first time you see it, it is actually Tom Hiddleston. And then the second time you see it, that's only when it's Jessica Chastain. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't. It was her both times. But yeah, you figured it out, and it doesn't really change the film. It's not like it hinged on that reveal.
No, it does. It doesn't really red herring you either, because they're both in on it. So in that sense, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it does matter when you learn that Tom Hiddleston actually has done none of the killings. Mm-hmm. But because it's revealed that Jessica Chastain has done all of the killings. Let's say Lucille. Let's stick with characters. Jessica Chastain hopefully hasn't killed anyone. Neither has Tom Hiddleston. Don't kill people. And I think maybe that's also a little hint, because it would have been really out of character for him to just start murdering this rando that he's just met if he hasn't been able to kill anyone before that. So
yeah, I wouldn't have minded. I think that's perhaps, for me, one of the weaker elements of the film is where they go to quite some lengths to redeem Tom Hiddleston, so he's still a viable romantic romantic partner for Edith. So it's he never did any of the killings. He feels really conflicted about it. He feels conflicted about Edith doing this. He
feels conflicted about the incest at some point.
Yeah, but it's like, well, he was part of it all, even if he didn't kill anyone. Clearly he was involved in the scheme, and clearly he married all those girls, setting them up for death. So I felt like it was kind of this fake innocence that they tried to kind of put on him. And I was like, just let him be a murderer. And then now he had a change of heart, and that makes it more meaningful, and that makes his connection to Edith more meaningful, because then the change is bigger.
Yeah.
And it's not so much, well, he did it 4 times or 3 times, and now this time he just couldn't stand it anymore. And it's more that she actually made him realize something.
Yeah. And now it's more of a reveal that, if you believe he was the murderer, you do not trust the feelings he has for her, and then it's from, he had feelings for her all along, instead of, he changed his mind. Yeah, that would have been a better story.
Definitely, because now it's kind of weird that if he does have feelings for her, why he goes through with it in the first place. Well, they've already murdered her dad, so I guess that's kind of sealing the deal.
Yeah.
But she can't have been the only one that was readily available, because they make a whole deal out of her that she was chosen quite specifically. That at least that was a feeling for me, that she was sort of hand selected
by him.
By him, yes, because I don't know why.
Not by Lucille.
Yeah, but that's weird, because clearly the only prerequisite turns out is that she's rich. Or that her dad is rich.
She has to be rich. She needs to have no living relatives. And I think they said something about being disillusioned or having like broken dreams, which they kind of assumed she had, because she didn't get her novel published the very first time that she pitched it to someone, and actually they wanted to publish it, but she had to make some changes to it, which is honestly probably the best answer you can get when you pitch your book somewhere. But
Yeah.
it's kind of a sidetrack.
I think that's not a sidetrack actually.
Oh, okay.
Because now that I think back on it, she gets her book rejected. Then she meets Thomas for the first time. He walks in, immediately gets one glance at the top of the manuscript that's on the desk, immediately says, "Oh, this is a good book. Who wrote this?" And sort of starts to woo her. How the hell does he know what's in the book after looking at one page? How can he tell it's that good?
He's a speed reader.
I think he knew about the book, bribed the official or bribed the editor who was supposed to confirm her book, basically, so to say this is good enough to publish, and then that way causing her to be more disillusioned. Because he said, "I arrived here early." Why would he arrive early if he didn't have any previous business?
I think you're reading too much into it.
I don't think
He arrived early because he did not have any previous business. This is the only thing he's got going for him. And I feel like the film would have showed us those things if it was true. And don't forget, he wasn't supposed to woo Edith. He was supposed to woo Eunice.
Who's Eunice?
The girl that was really mad that he danced with Edith and not her at the ball. But that's also weird because Eunice had a bunch of friends and a bunch of family with her.
Yes.
So she would have been... it wouldn't have been a suitable candidate either.
And when Thomas chose Edith, Lucille was like, she's too young. Like, she wasn't the perfect candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if she's too young, then it's weird. Then it's harder to make it look like she died of a natural death.
Yeah. So
I think.
Yeah.
And that's how you cover up a murder. But say that if that's the only flimsy thing we can find about this film, I would say this is a very successful film.
Yeah, I love it.
I love it, but you have to go in. You have to go with the film. I can see people who wouldn't necessarily go with this. It's not campy necessarily, but it has a sort of feel you have to go with.
Yeah.
Also with the old-timey wipes that's a sort of focus on a...
Yeah.
You have to go with the film and go along for the ride, and then it's a really good film.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it kind of has to be a cup of tea. You have to be able to appreciate the strong aesthetic that it has going and that it is a gothic romance. And if that is something that appeals to you, then you'll love the film. And if it's something that's just not your thing, it's not going to be a film. It's just probably not going to get anything out of it.
No, and if you go into expecting a horror film, then you might turn out a bit disappointed as well. But I'd still say this is a horror film.
Yeah.
It's not a scary horror film, it's not necessarily a ghost story film, but I still feel like the themes that are in there, the aesthetics and the sort of just how the way the story is framed around the murders is horrible enough in itself to constitute a horror film.
Yeah, but a gothic horror film, but also in the way it's told, it feels kind of old-ish. Old horror stories aren't that in-your-face, jump scary and stuff, and it's a different kind of horror, and I like that. So, and you really need to like the Guillermo touch on the film because it has all of them: the strong aesthetic, the stabbing of the face and the armpit, bathtub scene. It has everything.
Yeah.
Also the basement with the sort of silos with the red water in them. That was very Shape of Water, but also like very Hellboy to me. It was sort of that aesthetic, that sort of steampunky aesthetic it has going on. Also really liked, if we're talking about what it looks like in other films, I really like the Shining-esque face-off that they have in the snow with one chasing the other down with an axe, or like with a cleaver in this case. That was very The Shining, and I feel like that I like that touch. I like that that if it's not intentional, I like that it alluded to that a little bit.
It reminded me of a story we read in college, which is Elizabeth Gaskell's The Old Nurse's Story, which is kind of like the blueprint for gothic horror and gothic ghost stories, or stories featuring ghosts, as well, with ghosts being sort of figments of the past, that even sort of a living person can have a spectral imprint on the world. It really reminded me of that, and then kind of as the legacy of those kind of stories, it did really remind me of Shirley Jackson stories. And I'm not sure if I'd say it reminds me a lot of the series, The Haunting of Hill House, but it reminds me of the book, I suppose.
I would agree with you on that, but I haven't finished the book yet. I agree that it's not like the series, if only a little in aesthetic, as in it's an old ghost house.
Perhaps it's even more Bly Manor, although I'm not a huge fan of Bly Manor.
No.
It did also make quite a nod to Mary Shelley.
Yes, yes.
With Edith saying she rather be Mary Shelley and die a widow.
Yeah.
Which
she
is.
will.
Oh,
yeah, because she's
nice
been widowed.
foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, really like if we're talking harkening back on widows and the color of the ghosts, that Tom Hiddleston's ghost is white.
Yeah.
And not red or black. So it's sort of because he matches her color now, because she is dressed in white at the end.
Yeah, and kind of when she put her hand on him, it's like the ghost particles were sort of coming from her as well.
Yeah, exactly. So they've sort of got this connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was also kind of told by him that they would always have a connection even when they were apart, but also apart in time. I don't know the exact quote, but I found it strange that he said that, but now that there's such a focus on the ghost being on different times, that also is kind of, then.
And he said something like, if that happens, then I will die, but you'll be fine, basically. And she was like, no, I wouldn't be, but yeah, kind of. Yeah, I hope she's fine.
If I watch this movie again, I think I would see a lot of foreshadowing.
Yeah, they're not subtle about it in a very good way. Yeah, they're very clearly plotting this from the beginning, which is good. It's good that it's in there. I really like this film. It's one of my favorites, even if it's just because I love the costumes and the aesthetic. But yeah.
Yeah, and I can see why. It very pleasantly surprised me. I think it's going on one of my favorites lists as well. This is one I'd heavily recommend to anybody.
Yeah, it's a film with a good story, but a great aesthetic, and the aesthetic makes it a great movie for me. Yeah,
just the perfect marriage.
Yeah,
to a not so perfect marriage in the film.
Hey.
I think it's good to end on that pun, as we have often done.
Yes. I've been Grace.
I've been Wouter. Be sure to follow us on all the socials, leave comments and that sort of stuff.
And I've been Kyllian.
And you've been slashed.